morning. Thank you guys for being with us today here at Ocean View, whether you're in the room with us today or if you're watching online. I'm just really excited that you've decided to be with us and worship with us today, because we are going to have a really fun conversation today, one that I believe in pretty passionately. But before we jump into it, I want to share a quote with you. This is from a book that I loved when I was a kid. Some of you might recognize it as soon as we read it. Here it is. It very simply says, "I went to bed with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair." Anybody know the book? Anybody at home? It's Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. It's one of my favorite books, and I just started sharing it with my kids recently, and I love this story. It just simply follows Alexander on a very normal day in his life, but it turns out to be for him a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And it starts this way, with gum being in his hair when he wakes up in the morning, and it doesn't get any better from there. He goes downstairs, has breakfast. His brothers are having cereal. They find toys in their cereal box. That's the way cereal used to come, if you remember. And then in his cereal box, all he found was breakfast cereal. So that was upsetting. He goes to school. His mom forgot to pack him a dessert in his lunchbox. He goes to show his teacher his picture of his invisible castle. She is not impressed. He then goes to the dentist after school, and he is the only one of his siblings that has cavities. And then he goes to buy shoes after with his family, and they look for his favorite sneaker that he picked out. They don't have his size. In fact, all they have in his size is plain white tennis shoes. And throughout this story, he begins to wonder, maybe life would be better for him if he lived in Australia. At the end of everything that happens, he's like, I think I'll move to Australia. At the end of the story, he sits down with his mother and tells her just the horrible day that he has had. And she reminds him that some days are like that, even in Australia. And I read that as an adult now to my kids, and I'm just like, yeah, kids, they don't know. Some days are just like that. But if I'm honest with myself for a moment, and I'm honest with you guys, I feel like I have been having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day for months on end. Because I had plans, I had things of a way that I thought my day, my every single day, my weeks, my months were supposed to go. And those plans have been radically disrupted over the last several months. My son was graduating from kindergarten, so that got disrupted. In fact, his birthday was the weekend that everything shut down. Originally, we had a big surprise for him lined up. That didn't happen. My 10-year anniversary was supposed to be celebrated on a cruise ship. That got evaporated. We were supposed to have all these family gatherings over this, all these things that we were going to do with our family, and just gone, right? And that's not true just at my family. That's also true as a church. Like, we had all these things that we had lined up like way back in the fall of last year. Oh, this will be a great year. We'll have these married people events. This will be awesome. We'll do these parent Q events. This will be great. We'll do all these things for families. And all of it just got disrupted. And even in those moments where we feel like we finally have an opportunity to make a decision, to do something that actually is planned, we find out that there are murder hornets, or some sort of Saharan intercontinental dust storm, or there's a hurricane, or whatever it might be. There's always something else coming along to disrupt our plans. And that is nothing new. Disruptors have been around forever, for as long as we have been around, and that is nothing new. It's just that the weight now has changed and shifted. Our families have changed and shifted through all of this as well. Over the last several weeks, we've been exploring this idea of rerouting, what that means for our church, what that means not just for the local church right here at Ocean View, but also for the church at large. What are the things that we value? What are the things that we say we truly believe? And in the middle of everything that's happening in our world right now, when we start stripping things back and we start leaving that realm where everything was just comfortable, and we start taking things away, what truly matters at the end? What truly do we care about? So if you're coming and you're joining us today and maybe you haven't heard those other messages, I would encourage you to go online or in our app and you can find some of those. We would love for you to catch up and kind of join us on this journey as we kind of reevaluate maybe the things that God has called us to do and how we help people follow Jesus. Today, I'm excited because we are going to talk about something that God has just kind of done in my life over the course of time, and that is this amazing passion and desire for kids and for students, and how we impact and pass faith on from one generation to the next. Back in February, I spoke about family. I kind of spoke about what was true in my life, how normal, everyday people said yes to serving God in some way, and what seemed like just a normal thing for them actually had a tremendous impact in my life. And I'm not going to rehash all of that conversation. You can go back and listen to that. It was in February, our family series. We spent a whole month talking about the family. But there are some things that I think if I just bring back up, just some key points from that will kind of lay the foundation for our conversation today. So we're just going to kind of jump into that. And I want to remind you of one thing that we said then, and that is still true. Making deposits in a person's life while they are young will earn more interest. And we talked about how that is true. We know that that's true just inherently. When we think about like bank accounts or saving accounts, we know that the earlier that we invest, the earlier that we make deposits, the longer interest has time to accrue. So the earlier and the more that we invest in an early kind of deposit, the greater the return later. And that's true in our relationships. That's true with your spouse. The more investment that you make in a relationship, the better opportunity you have for trust to build, for love to build, for all of that to continue to grow. The same is true in our kids. We know that they are formed, and their formative years are when they are young, and the more that we deposit and invest in them when they are younger, the greater the payoff is as they grow up. And another way of saying that is simply that what we do for a kid now is more important than what you do for an adult later. And some of us gasped when I said that originally because we're like, that can't be true, but we know that it absolutely is true. We know that there is a window of time that we have an opportunity with our kids to invest in them, to help them shape the trajectory of their life. And we know that that is true because somebody did that for you. In your life, as you were growing up, somebody came alongside of you and they invested in you, they equipped you or empowered you to be all that God has called you to be, to set you on a journey of faith for the rest of your life. Or maybe that didn't happen for you, and so those deposits weren't made in your life. But what we do for a kid now is more important than what we do for an adult later. We believe that to be true. And this all kind of stems from this one central idea, and this comes right back. God kind of set this up when he is gathering together his people, his nation, when he is gathering them together and he's saying, here's kind of how I want you to live as you follow me. This is kind of the groundwork for what I'm going to tell you today. Moses is about to enter into the promised land, and God's people are about to go in, and they are going to finally come into what God had for them. And Moses says, hey, before we go in there, I just want to remind you of a few things. And so this is what Moses said, just to remind us as well. Israel, listen to me. The Lord is our God. The Lord is the one and only God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. Love him with all your strength. The commandments I give you today must be in your hearts. They must be in your hearts. Make sure your children learn them. And you might ask, well, how can I make sure? Well, he's going to answer that. Talk about them when you're at home. Talk about them when you walk along the road. Speak about them when you go to bed. And speak about them when you get up. Write them down. Tie them on your hands as a reminder. Tie them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses. Write them on your gates. This idea was that, hey, listen, this is a call for all of our families to make sure that you are passing faith down from one generation to the next, and kind of a prescription for how to do that. There's just one kind of caveat with this. You might be here today, or you might be watching online, you might be thinking, well, I don't have kids, or my kids are grown. And you say, so this doesn't apply to me. And that is false. Because this thing that Moses was saying wasn't just to parents. If you remember, he said, hear Israel, the entire community, the entire nation of believing people, hey, this applies to you. My dad is from Wisconsin. He married my mom, who is from Virginia. And so he learned very quickly the difference between y'all and all y'all. And you all know the difference. If you are from the South, you understand the difference between all and all y'all, right? Y'all is a very specific kind of group of people. It could just mean 1 to 3 people. It's y'all. All y'all involves a much larger group of people. And so what Moses is saying isn't just to y'all, the parents. He's saying this to all y'all, the entire nation. For our context, the entire church. If you are a follower of Jesus, he is calling you to have an impact on the next generation, because whether present or absent, you already are. So believing that is true, we also believe that no one has greater potential to influence the faith of a child than a parent. That is 100% true. And that is true in your life. Your parents, maybe they didn't follow Jesus. That had an impact on you. Maybe your parents did follow Jesus. That had an impact on you. So whether present or absent, whether they were part of your life or not, whether they were engaged in a church or with God or not, that has an impact on us. And the same is true for our kids. No one has greater potential to influence the faith of a kid than a parent. But we also believe this to be true, that no one has greater potential to influence a parent than the church. So if we want the faith of parents to be strengthened and developed, then we also as a church have to partner with those families to ensure that is happening. That is a calling that we have on our life. And I believe all of those things to be true. And then everything changed. And those things are still true. In the middle of a worldwide pandemic, in the middle of hurricane season, in the middle of all kinds of unrest all over the world, these things are still true. It doesn't change. So it's left me with a couple of questions. Knowing that those things are true and knowing that things are now different, how does a family create a rhythm for that faith when the whole system has been disrupted? Because that's what it feels like. Everything feels upended. Topsy-turvy, wonky, everything's out of place. So not only how does a family do that, but I'm looking at us as a church, as a body of believers, and I'm asking the question, okay, how does a church help parents create that rhythm when the whole system has been disrupted? Because everything is different now. And in my own life, I'm recognizing this. In my own family. You see, about a month ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. Not just me, but my entire family. And it was in that 2 weeks of being in the house, being still and not going anywhere, which was really easy for me to do because I just love being still. It drives me crazy. So we get into this situation where we find ourselves in quarantine, and I remember looking at Whitney one night, I was just like, I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day. Like, I feel like every day is just exactly the same. And she said, well, this is normal life for me, just so you're aware, but you just haven't experienced it. Just the rhythm of we wake up in the morning, the kids come downstairs. Hey, I'm hungry. Great, we will feed you. Now we have to clean you and the kitchen and the floor. And then we go play for a little bit, and then they say, hey, I'm hungry. And then we clean them in the kitchen and the floor. And then a little bit later, I need lunch. And we clean the kitchen floor again. And then it happened, we go outside for a minute, we'll play for a minute, then we need another snack. You start measuring time in snacks. It's very confusing. And then at 5 o'clock, there's dinner. Every single night, dinner comes. Even though you know it's coming, you're still surprised that it's there. It shows up. And then after dinner, there's the cleanup and the cleaning of the floor and the children. Bed, bath time, we have the book routine, we have the conversation after we go to bed and all of that kind of stuff. And then the next day, we start all over again. And I just felt like after day 4, I'm like, we're done. When are we done? No, we still have another week of this. Are you kidding? And so that's how it felt for a long time. And it felt like in that moment that we were not going anywhere. I felt like I was on the road to nowhere. Because as a dad, I have ideas for my kids, right? I want them to grow up. I want them to be a part of God's family. I want them to come and be a part of a community, a body of believers where they are learning about God, they're learning about others, they're learning about Jesus, and they are understanding more about his amazing love for them from other people, so it's not just me. I want them to go to schools so that they can grow up and have a great career and be all that God has called them to be, so that one day they might have a family of their own one day, and we can say, wow, wasn't that a great journey that we were on? But honestly, I feel like I am going nowhere. That's how it feels. So this idea of creating a rhythm, having this rhythm, how do you even measure that? And the truth is, we measure rhythm all the time. We measure it in music. We measure it in our heartbeat. I think God has intentionally put rhythms in our life that we encounter all the time. We take our pulse, and there's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm sometimes when we move, when we walk. There's a rhythm to our day. I think that's why Moses identified those ideas of, hey, when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, when you walk along the road, when you sit down together as a family, those natural, everyday kind of rhythms that we should have in our life and in our family. Those things haven't changed. But yet, I'm so focused on the big destination, and I feel like I'm going nowhere. And then God reminded me of something. He said, hey, I taught you something a long time ago, that when you feel like you're going nowhere, all it requires a little bit is a little shift in your focus. To take your focus off of the feeling of going nowhere and start focusing a little bit on the now and the here. It's just a slight shift, but it changes everything. So when we focus on the now, here, how do we as families, how do we as a church, all y'all, create a new rhythm for our families? Because here's what's true. Your family's rhythm actually also creates your family's values. It begins to shape that. Your kids, your students, they're watching you to see what you value. As a church, they are watching us to see what we value. Our rhythms communicate that. So what is being communicated right now in your rhythms? Because as those rhythms go along, it's actually shaping their values. And that's true in your life. Your values that you currently have were shaped by your family, by the rhythms that your family had. I grew up where we would go to church all the time. I would go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Friday and Saturday. There was usually something going on. So a lot of my life was spent in that kind of rhythm, which is interesting because I don't know that that was essential now. I'll get to that in just a second. Here's kind of what's happened over the last several months. We've developed two different kinds of rhythms. There's this at-home rhythm and this at-church kind of rhythm. See, I grew up in that church rhythm of the doors are open and there I have to be there. But it went against everything that was always taught to me. It went against the idea that we are the church, that if I'm a follower of Jesus, that God's Spirit is living inside of me. And it had nothing to do with the place or the day. And we also knew, and we would also say, and we would also believe that a one-day-a-week faith is not enough. The idea that I can go to church on Sunday and that's enough faith to carry me through the rest of my week, we knew that that wasn't true. And somehow we confused it. Well, the place matters. And it wasn't the intent that every time the doors are open that we show up. That wasn't the intent there. But it was the idea of creating that everyday kind of faith. And now our current worldwide situation has forced us into a place where we have to actually live this out. Where we actually have to say, do I have an everyday, at-home kind of faith? And does my family see that? We knew that Sunday wasn't the spot anymore. Now it has to be every single day. And it forced our families to realize this as well. My own family, we had to wrestle with this because our church building was shut down for 10 weeks. And if you're online, you're still online because you're feeling safe there. That makes complete sense. And you're not ready to come back to this, but that rhythm has still been disrupted. As I'm speaking right now, you might have kids running all over the place. That's how it was for me. So how do we balance these rhythms out? How do we find that rhythm at home, at church, and how do they connect together? Because I think we've learned something, and again, it's nothing new, but we learned that the role of the parent matters. And it's not that it didn't matter before, it's just that now it's elevated even more. The role of the parent in developing the faith of their kid matters now more than it ever has before. But not only that, the role of the church matters more now than it ever has before as well. And when I say the church, I don't mean like this place. I'm talking about us. If you're a follower of Jesus, I'm talking about us coming alongside of families, speaking into the lives of kids and students. That matters now more than ever. Also, staying connected to one another matters now more than it ever has before. Because we're not able to meet in the groups that we really wanted to meet in. We're not able to just gather together in the same way as we used to be able to do. So it takes a little extra effort on our part to stay connected with one another. So we have these rhythms of at home and at church. And faith can absolutely and should be developed at home. And faith can absolutely and should grow at church. But they still need one another. Because I think when those two things are combined, I think it gives us a greater opportunity to lay a foundation for our kids, for our students, for the next generation, for anyone. To understand that they have a place where they belong, where they are known, and that people know them, that they have a mission, that God is inviting them to be a part of a bigger story than they know or can imagine, that God has a plan and a purpose for their life, and that they have an opportunity to love one another the way that Christ loved us, to help other people follow Jesus and invite others into that big story. I think those things are critical. So as we focus on the now here, this rhythm, we have to figure that out. We have to make sure that what we value is actually being passed on. Also in the now and here, we have to take an opportunity to focus on another idea, and that is widening the circle. Terry talked about this a few weeks ago, and we're going to continue to have this conversation, but the idea that maybe we still have circles that we're moving in. If you're at home, you still have a circle that you're moving in. And someone identified these for me a long time ago, and it's always kind of stuck with me. Typically, these are kind of the circles that we live in. We live, that's one circle. That may be your house, that's your kids, that's your family, that might be your in-laws, that might be your neighbors next door or across the street. You have a circle of people where you live that you are continuing to do life together with. And I'm not saying that widen the circle, like have a big party. I'm just saying maybe expand the influence that you have and that others have in that circle where you work. A lot of us are still going to work, and so maybe you have an opportunity there to speak into the lives of other families. You have an opportunity to have influence with the people that you're working alongside or under, or that work under you. Where you play. If you play sports, I drive by a baseball field, there's sports happening a lot. I say sports in general because that's how I refer to all sports, because I don't understand sports. I know people are playing golf, so if you play golf, then that's a great opportunity for you to expand your influence in that circle. Maybe you go to the gym. Whatever your recreational thing might be, you have a circle there where you study. If you're a student at school, and you say, well, it's online, or it's hybrid, or it's whatever. We don't know what it is yet, right? But you still have a circle of people that are there. You have a teacher. You have classmates. You're learning alongside of other people, whatever that might be for you. Where you shop, you have the same places that you go to where you're buying your groceries, or the same person that's bringing them out to your car if you're not going inside, or that delivery person, whatever it might be. You have these circles already kind of built in. And the question is, all right, how are we widening that circle to make sure that we are being of influence in that circle and that we have the right voices influencing our kids? That's why the church is so important. That's why all y'all is so important. It's because every kid, every student needs a place to belong, where they can be on mission, where they understand that they're part of a bigger story, and they need other voices speaking into their kids' lives. I need other voices speaking into my kids' life. That's why I love that my kids love coming here. Our kids' environments are at 9:30 right now, and I love that. There are other voices besides mom and dad telling him the truth about Jesus, about God, about how awesome he is. Here's the thing, and we look at these circles, relationships matter, our response matters, and our rhythm matters. In all of those circles, relationships matter tremendously, and your response to what's happening in this world matters. And I'm just going to rabbit trail for just a second. I want you to stay with me, because here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the next generation looking at us right now. Kids and students are looking at the people of God. They're looking at his church, and they're wondering, do we really believe what we say we believe? Do we really believe that it's important for God's people to be together, to serve in our community, to love one another, to help other people follow Jesus in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, in the middle of locusts attacking everything, in the middle of everything that's happening in our world? Do we really, truly believe that? Because we are demonstrating for them who the church is and what the church is called to be in this moment. And their eyes are on us. And our response matters. And I'm just going to say this. I feel like there's a lot of people who are walking around in fear right now. And I have to tell you something, that fear is not from God. It's not. I'm not talking about masks and cleaning. I'm not talking about all of that. There is wisdom. We can take precautions and be wise. I'm talking about the feeling of fear that sometimes grips us from doing what God has called us to do. If you have that fear, that is not from Him. In fact, perfect love, John tells us, casts out fear. So if you are feeling fear right now, I want you to first turn to Jesus and just accept the love that He has for you, and then take that love and share it with somebody else. And that fear will evaporate, because perfect love casts it out. Okay? So our response matters. Kids and students are watching us. Your rhythm matters. It's left me with another question that I'm asking a lot, and that is, what are our kids inheriting? Because we are leaving something for them. I shared with our leaders a few weeks ago, and I believe this, I say this a lot, 100 years from now, the only thing that matters in a person's life is their relationship with Jesus. At the end of all of this, when all of this settles down, when there is a vaccine or whatever might come about, 100 years from now, the only thing that matters is a person's relationship with Jesus, and that is what should drive all of us. 100 years from now, that's it. But I've been thinking a lot about 10 years from now. Because 10 years from now, my son will be in high school. And I'm wondering how his faith is being shaped right now that affects him then. Is that foundation going to be there? The one that's being laid right now, the one that all y'all, this Ocean View Church, that we as a community of believers, for our community, for our kids, for our neighbors' kids, are we laying that foundation well right now so that 10 years from now, they have that to anchor to? What about 1 year from now? 1 year from now, what does that look like in my kid? Because the thing is, and here's what we've just known to be true, and we kind of knew that, is that 30% of our church body is coming back to this physical space. 70% are still online, and they're not coming out. And that's fine. We get that. We completely understand that. I'm just saying there has to be a rhythm so that your kids don't lose that anchor point for an entire year, that they go by without being connected to God's people, without being engaged with His Word, because 1 year from now, what does their faith look like? I'm thinking about 1 month from now. In 4 weeks, is there a church that still cares passionately about kids and students? What about next week? 1 week from now? Who are the voices in his life that are speaking that truth, that aren't me and Whitney? Is there a church for him that's going to invest in him, knowing that it has greater potential now than it ever has before? Paul wrote this. He said, "When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly." In this moment, in this space and time, right now, everything is very puzzling, like reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. One day we're going to see everything the way that Jesus does, right? And all that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then when I am with Him, I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. And here's what He says next. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. These 3 things will outlive any worldwide pandemic. They will outlive any political debate. They will outlive anything. Is those 3 things, faith, hope, and love, are our kids and our students, are they seeing a church that recognizes that and is willing to share that with everyone else? Are we invested in those kids and those students, in our own kids and our own students? As we focus on the now and here, we also have to simply be present. We have to show up. And that requires fighting for the heart. And I used to think this meant fighting against a lot of outside influences that are competing for my kids' heart. And that is true. But I've also found, especially in a 2-week quarantine, that it's also me fighting against myself. It's also me taking the time and effort to just be with my kids so they can see that Jesus is in me. They can see how I respond. They can see that in the middle of what's happening, that there is still a faith that I hold to believe to be true. And this is usually where I insert a rant against technology and kids and social media apps and how that has caused a spike in depression and anxiety and suicide amongst our teenagers. But I'm not going to do that right now. Instead, I'll just share with you a quote that I read recently from a child advocate who is very anti-social media for kids and students. And he said this: love is 2% effort and 98% putting down your phone. That means if you have a kid or a student around you, put your phone down, spend time with them, invest in them. And I know that when I say that, I am saying that to myself as well. Because with everything going on and everything that's being disrupted, it's just easier to escape sometimes. But guys, the nuance that is facing our kids right now is unlike anything before. And they need us now more than ever. Not just parents, but all y'all. Here's what else. We have to make it personal. Every single person in this room, if you're a follower of Jesus or watching at home, we have to make it personal. It can't just be words anymore. It has to be action. It can't just be something that we say we believe. We actually have to cling to it, and we have to invest in the lives of kids and students now more than ever because they are worth it, because the investment matters. Here's what David said. He said, "My people hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth with a parable. I will utter hidden things from of old, things we have heard and known, things our ancestors have told us." These are things that were passed on to them, things that are passed on to us. "We will not hide them from their descendants." Notice it says there, that means each other, right? "We will tell the next generation." What? What are we going to tell the next generation? Are we going to tell them how we endured quarantine? Are we going to tell them how 2020 was the worst year ever? Are we going to tell them about dust storms and murder hornets? Are we going to tell them about locusts? Are we going to tell them how it almost took Betty White from us? It's close. It's not over. What are we going to tell the next generation about this time? Hopefully, we will tell them about the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, His power, and the wonders He has done. We have to cling to this. We have to make it personal. We have to focus a little bit on the now and here and realize the investment and the opportunity that we have is unlike anything else in history. And I truly believe it changes the course for our kids, for your kids, for our community, the trajectory of their faith for an entire generation. It's all in how we create that rhythm. Will you pray with me? God, thank you for the opportunity that we have right now in this season to make a difference. To make a difference not just in our own family, but in the lives of others. To create a rhythm of opportunity to know you and to make you known. To share your love with other people. God, for the kids in our schools, our Myrtle Beach Elementary, we have a tremendous opportunity. God, give us the fortitude to accomplish that task that you have given to us. That an entire school would just reach out to a church and say, "We need help." God, thank you for that opportunity. God, for the kids and the students who call Ocean View home, let us be a church where every person, everyone who knows you, everyone who believes in you and who you are and the love that you have, they have a place to belong, a place where they can serve with passion in the giftedness that you have given them, that they invite others into that big story that you have. God, let us be driven to action, to not be complacent, to not just sit still and think it's somebody else's thing, but realize that this is a calling you have given to each and every single one of us. That whether absent or present, we are having an impact on the next generation. But God, please let us be present. Don't let us miss this opportunity. God, for our families, for my family, for the families that are in this room, that are in this community, that are watching at home, help us to create that rhythm, to not lose sight of what's truly important, of what matters most, of helping our kids follow Jesus. Don't let a week go by, a month, a year, 10 years. God, let us see the foundation that we are laying. God, let's be a part of it. Ask that you would spur hearts now to say yes, because someone said yes to you a long time ago and it changed my life forever. Do this in our church, in our community. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.